is one of my favorite players to watch. She is just a phenomenal Hearthstone player and a great representative for women in Hearthstone. And she will be going up against Heidilisk, who is a name that you at home may not know quite as well. But Heidi has been playing Hearthstone since the absolute beginning. She's a phenomenal player, really nice person. And it's going to be a test for her, however, to see how she holds up against Teebs.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much want to echo everything that you've just said. Heidilisk is one of these names that I've seen on Twitter throughout the years of Hearthstone, heard her mentioned every now and then, and clearly a very well-known, very respected player. But on the other side of things, Teebs, as you said, Teebs is a legend. She has been around maybe for not quite as long as Heidilisk, but Teebs has been everywhere. Over the last year, you'd be lucky to find a tour stop where you didn't find Teebs, because she was making the rounds and doing some pretty good work.
Yeah, she's got some really nice finishes over the last year or so. Been bouncing around from team to team. I believe Teebs will be representing at WESG Finals, I want to say, for Canada, yes. I believe. So yes, we're going to be seeing some exciting stuff from Teebs over the next several months, as well as I believe that finals will be in China around the beginning of March. And a lot of money on the line there. So this might be a good warm-up for Teebs. I know that I've been seeing her tweeting a little bit here and there because this is the Hearthstone off-season. She was taking a little bit of time to branch out to other things, take some time for herself. But I don't think that means that Teebs is resting on her laurels by any means. Teebs is a player who, for her, Hearthstone is a lot like riding a bike. You know, you can take a little bit of time off to focus on other things and maybe decompress. But when you come back, it is always going to be business as usual.
That's right. And obviously, Teebs, having made all of these rounds and these tour stops, Teebs has a lot of friends amongst the pro players. And she did mention to me that she has had Luca help her prepare a lineup for this event. So as you'll find with most Hearthstone pro players, they don't try and do this alone. They do rely on their friends as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to remember the old adage, 2 heads are better than 1. In this case, you need a practice partner. You need a group of practice partners is even better. So a lot of brains to sort of bounce around lineups in particular. And we can actually take a look at the lineups from Teebs and Heidilisk. Just a brief glimpse. Teebs is going to be running an Odd Paladin, a Xerix Cloning Gallery OTK style of Priest deck. Then we've got something similar to Death Star Hunter with Crackling Razor Maws, the Beast package from Master's Call and Dire Frenzy, looking to be very aggressive there. And then a Quest Rogue. And this lineup specifically has been prepared in response to the balance patch that we had come through just a couple of days ago, where several cards were nerfed, and now this is the first time that these players are having to play on a new balance patch. Heidi has taken a rather different route, I would say. She has an Odd Warrior, pretty standard stuff, a mech style of Odd Warrior. But she does have Devilsaur eggs in the list, so that is quite interesting. Then she has a Death Rattle Hunter, which is certainly a bit more controlling than the Hunter from Teebs. An Even Warlock featuring Mojo Master Zihi, which is always fun. And then an OTK Holy Wrath Shirvala Paladin deck. So a lot more of a controlling lineup from Heidi.
Yeah, and if the information that I've got on my screen is correct, then Teebs' Quest Rogue has actually been banned away, as has Heidi's Warrior. So
okay.
That's funny, because obviously you think of the Quest Rogue as the Warrior counter, and it's actually those 2 decks that have been banned. This is best out of 5, last hero standing. So do you think there's any sweeper decks there potentially, Cora?
I think Teebs has brought a lineup of entirely sweeper decks, and Teebs banning the Warrior from Heidi is a great call and read into the fact that Heidi wants to ban that Quest Rogue. So obviously, if the Rogue were left up, Teebs does not want to ban away the Warrior. Rogue is going to be one of the Warrior's hardest counters. But knowing that Heidi is very likely to ban the Rogue because it's just very scary, it's a very scary deck to play against, Teebs went ahead and banned the Warrior out because it has the best potential against some of her other aggressive decks, like the Odd Paladin and that aggressive Hunter deck. But with that Warrior out of the mix, now Heidi is, I would say, in a very precarious position here. She has 3 decks which can easily be taken advantage of by Odd Paladin and by this aggressive Hunter. And then you throw that Xerix Cloning Gallery Priest into the mix, which is sort of a very different entity, but also has pretty reasonable matchups here. Psychic Scream against Hunter is a powerhouse. Against the Warlock, now you have the addition of Mass Hysteria for early giant boards, which force the Warlock to go quite a bit slower. And just the spell damage and ability to generate multiple powerful board states is really difficult for the Paladin deck to deal with. So I would say that Teebs has the upper hand.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my next question, and you've definitely made that pretty clear. Heidilisk is going to have a bit of a struggle going on, but it's definitely possible. It's still Hearthstone that we are playing after all.
Yeah, absolutely. These matchups are not, 70-30, 80-20 matchups by any means. We're in a very balanced meta in Hearthstone right now. It actually have been for pretty much this entire competitive year, which is why a lot of the professional players have been very happy with the direction of the game over the last year or so, because there's so much diversity. The balance has been really quite on point. Blizzard has been very receptive to community opinions and have been initiating balance changes that honestly we didn't expect and in some cases didn't even ask for. So it really has been a great competitive year for Hearthstone. And these matchups, while they do favor Teebs, this is nothing that Heidi can't overcome. Death Rattle Hunter is still one of the strongest decks in the game. And if she gets that matchup against the Priest, I would say it's slightly Priest favored, but okay for the Hunter. Against the odd Paladin, yeah, she's going to have a tough time there. There's no way about that. That's probably her most poor matchup. But Hunter v. Hunter, yeah, it's not terrible. Teebs could get off to a bad start.
Well,
but
looks like we're actually jumping into the first game. It's going to be
right.
Teebs on the Hunter versus Heidilisk on her Paladin. Now, funny that these are the two decks that should come up first, because I was actually about to say before the game started, you mentioned these nerfs that happened over the last week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Teebs is actually running Hunter's Mark in her Hunter, and Heidilisk is actually running Equality in her Paladin still.
I think that is strictly due to the nature of these two decks. Holy Wrath OTK Paladin needs to have removal. It needs to survive until it can draw through its entire deck. So you need to have the Equality in the list, even though it now is 4 mana instead of 2. It's doubled in cost. It is still a pivotal card, and I think we'll still be seeing it see play in Control Paladin lists, maybe not in Even Paladin. Maybe Even Paladin could go in a more aggressive direction, but it still fits in this deck. And then for Teebs, this Hunter has very little removal, and Hunter's Mark plus Candle Shot, even though it now costs 1 more mana than it did, is still, I would say, necessary here to be able to push through the damage to actually win the game, because Heidi will have some good sources of life gain in this one. Shirvallah the Tiger, of course, cards like Flash of Light and Crystal Smith Kangor can be a little bit difficult for Teebs to push those final points of damage.
Yeah. In a world where your Hunter is running Spider Bomb, maybe you can afford to drop the Hunter's Mark, but not in the more aggressive Death Star version.
Yeah, and we can see from Heidi's Hunter list, no Hunter's Mark in there. You drop the Candle Shot, you drop the Hunter's Mark, replaced by Fireflies, usually, and then you can choose to tech it out a little bit more strongly. A copy of Defender of Argus or a copy of Mossy Horror, I think, fit in that list quite well. It's just not necessary there, whereas with this Hunter build from Teebs, it is still quite necessary to have the Hunter's Mark. But a very nice start for Teebs overall. She would have loved to have had a Dire Maul or a Spring Paw on turn 1 into the Crackling Razor Maw on 2, but she's got a curve, and this Hunter deck lives and dies by that curve in the early game.
Yeah, I mean, this is about to get out of control. We're talking Companion into Dire Frenzy. She can fit in the Crackling Razor Maw if she'd like to. There's a kill command for lethal at some point soon. And there's the 2 mana Hunter's Mark.
Whereas
this is fine.
Heidilisk has a lot of combo pieces.
She does.
That's about it. This version of Paladin, win condition A is Baleful Banker, Shirvallah the Tiger into the deck, and then Holy Wrath for 25 damage direct to face, because you're guaranteed to pull the Shirvallah the Tiger, as it is the last card in your deck. But you also need to run a plan B when you're going up against decks that can get above 25 life, and that is the Uther of the Ebon Blade Death Knight OTK, in which case you need that third bouncer. In this list, it is Zola the Gorgon, sometimes Youthful Brewmaster, or double Baleful Banker, which we can see from Heidi's hand. But then you're starting to run a lot of pieces that are late game tools and can clog up your early starting hand if you're not fortunate. So she's looking for call to arms. She's looking for cards that draw more cards that remove, like True Silver Champion. And her hand's just kind of clogged right now.
Something that Teebs is able to really take advantage of this turn is that aforementioned equality nerf, because usually the Hunter player at this point would have to think, well, my opponent could always play Equality Pyromancer next turn. But in this case, Equality now costs 4. Teebs could just go all in. She can throw everything she's got onto the board and deal as much damage as possible. This game might not go on for much longer.
Actually, my mistake, of course. This version doesn't run the call to arms because you need to have the Baleful Bankers. So it's going to be Christology in this case, actually, to draw out the Novice Engineers and Blood Mage Thalnos and Kangor to then cycle through the deck. But the Consecration by itself is good enough here. This can be followed up by the Hammer of Wrath for additional removal, High Priest the Call in hand for Heidi as well, just to represent a body on the...
Leox it is then.
It's not Huffers, but...
It's not.
It is still difficult for Heidi to deal with, and Teebs has seen that Heidi hasn't had much to go with. She had to play Consecration on 5 off curve. There was no True Silver on turn 4. There's been no Christology or Novice Engineer. It's been a rough go for Heidi so far.
And Teebs, I don't know if this is confidence here, but she's playing incredibly quickly. Like, playing that Dire Frenzy on the Leok, I don't think that was necessarily the obvious play that turn. Like, there were other options available to her, but Teebs wasting no time this game. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah, I think that speaks more to familiarity to me than anything else. Teebs is straight up just one of the best players in Hearthstone. Not just one of the best women, just one of the best players.
Yeah.
So Teebs has honestly probably more experience playing this game than I would say any of the other women at this level of the tournament right now. So she certainly has experience with this deck in particular and just knows how she wants to get the job done here. And I'm thinking Teebs can smell blood in the water right now. Yes. Heidi is down to just 6 life, and there are 6 jacked up Leox in the deck right now.
And no heals in Heidi's hand. With Hero Power, Kill Command, able to go down next turn along with the Lynx. The writing's on the wall, Cora.
Holy Wrath to try to kill the Leok, and Heidi is running 2 copies of Holy Wrath in the deck, so she can afford to expend 1 copy to try and kill the Leok and still have the Holy Wrath out for lethal later on, but she was not going to get to that point there. So Teebs is going to take game number 1. The Hunter getting off to a very aggressive start, even though I will say that Heidi's Paladin is rather well equipped for that matchup. The equality nerf really, really hurts because it means that she can't clear the board until much later. But had there been Christologies, True Silver Champion in particular would have been phenomenal in the early game there to take down the Leok and prevent those Dire Frenzies from being played. It was just too slow of a start for her.
Equality plus Wild Pyromancer is just such a key important combo, and that now costing 6, and obviously Equality Consecration now costing 8, is a bit of a disaster for that deck. It's going to be the Hunter Mirror up next, which is what are you thinking, Cora? Which deck do you think is favored here?
I think Teebs is quite favored here.
Yeah, I agree.
Death Rattle Hunter is so strong, but it just does not do well enough against aggro. And actually, I'm just speaking without looking at the list here. Heidi's not even running True Silver Champion. You have to make cuts for second Holy Wrath and for like High Priest the Call, 2 copies of Hammer of Wrath. So I guess just not feeling the need to run additional points of removal, just trying to cycle through the deck as quickly as possible. But yeah, that can come back to hurt you when you're playing against a lot of aggro. I think Teebs had a really good read on the meta.
Bit of an awkward tracking here for Heidi. She has to go with the Witchwood Grizzly because it's vital against this aggressive Hunter deck. But really, she's going to regret having thrown away that Katharina.
It pains me. It really does. But Heidi can simply win this game by sticking a Grizzly and cubing it. No silence in the deck for Teebs. Yep. No way to prevent that cube from having Death Rattle into 2 massive Grizzlies that she just simply can't deal with. So I think Heidi went with the right pick there, but it's really hard to ever justify not taking Katharina. But Teebs did not have a 1 or a 2 drop. I mean, she had the tracking, but then no Razor Maw or Dire Maul to follow it up. So a little bit of a slower start for her here, which is exactly what Heidi needed.
Yeah, right? The counter to the Dire Frenzy to buff up the Misha. But there you go. Crackling Razor Maw sort of solves that problem for Teebs now. Not having those 1 or 2 drops did hurt her curve quite dramatically, as Heidi has the egg on the board. She's starting to get set up for the big Death Rattle Hunter plays herself.
Yeah, and I really like this trade that Teebs is taking. If Teebs does not take that trade, Heidi, going into turn 4, can flanking strike the Crackling Razor Maw and guaranteed get the Spider Bomb kill onto the Misha. So Teebs knows that she's got to take that trade, and then maybe 50% of the time, her Razor Maw dies, and she gets to stick a Misha on the board in the face of a Wolf from flanking strike. So that was the right call to make. Didn't work out there.
And now Teebs has sort of got a handful of junk. She doesn't want to be playing 3-mana do nothing on turn 5, and she certainly doesn't want to be following that up with a hero power, but she had no choice here. And now Heidi is going off, cubing the egg, got Witchwood Grizzly ready to go next turn. Teebs is in trouble.
It can be very difficult for the Death Rattle Hunter to ever get ahead before turn 8 when Katharina Winterwisp comes down in matchups against aggressive decks. And a lot of the time they don't make it to turn 8 because they're just so ill-equipped to deal with aggression, especially now that they're not running Candle Shot. So the fact that Heidi has been able to gain this much ground by turn 6 just completely swings this match on its head. I would say she's very heavily from this point on. But Teebs' deck can do a lot of really surprising burst damage out of nowhere with that Tundra Rhino we see in her hand.
It can. It can. It's certainly possible. And if maybe Teebs finds a turn to put Deathstalker Rexar onto the board, maybe she can get some sort of bloat bat thing going on. But this is all so slow, so she's having to just drop the high main. Gets to trade away the 3-1 quite easily, but still very behind on this board, and Heidi is just going to go more and more berserk here with the play dead pickup.
So I think Heidi does need to be careful here, but this is a point where she can try to close out this game in 2 or 3 turns. However, Teebs with Unleash the Hounds and a single or even 2 copies of Timberwolf, that's a lot of damage on the backswing. So I like that she's going very aggressive here and trying to represent lethal next turn, but you do need to consider all of the potential counterpoints from Teebs. And this is actually just...
I mean, this is the most explosive.
14 damage on the backswing.
This is the most explosive play that Teebs can come up with. It's not bad.
This companion can roll Huffer or Leok for additional damage. But she is going to have to play cleanup here. That's not even necessarily a bad thing. That cube has eggs in it, which Heidi can't easily proc because she's not running Mossy Horror. And a board of eggs isn't going to kill Teebs. So if Teebs just clears this board as best she can here, then high main's sticking, and she's got Rexar on the follow-up. And again, I don't think that this was a point where Heidi should have been playing very defensively and playing to, kill the high main, for instance, that turn. But was it necessary to play dead on the egg and extend further into the board in the face of Unleash the Hounds? Maybe not.
Well, looking at Teebs' deck, I think that was pretty much the best possible comeback that she had available. She knows that Heidi can't play King Crush this turn, obviously 1 mana short. Mind Control Tech doesn't hit a charge minion. That's somewhat relevant. Now Heidi is having to start trading again.
She's going to have to clear up this Timberwolf, and now her hand is kind of dry.
Yeah.
After King Crush next turn, not much water left in the well. So Teebs is not out of the water yet by any means. She's getting quite low, only 13 life left. But quite a good Rexxar.
Yeah, I mean, she can clear up the entire board whilst leaving the eggs all on 1 health. That's about as good as it gets here.
Yeah, it gets to hold on to the hyena on the board as well.
Yeah. And these hero powers can do some serious work over the next few turns.
Yeah, she's going to be looking for anything combined with Vicious Scalehide will be phenomenal for that lifesteal. Cave Hydra is incredible, poisonous for clearing up the King Crush that you know could potentially be played next turn. But Teebs does have the Hunter's Mark in hand, so as long as she survives, she can clear up that King Crush, and then just has to hope that Heidi doesn't have very good top decks. But this is sort of why cubing the Devilsaur egg, immediately it is quite good. You get a 5/5 on the board, you get the body of the 4/6 as well. But without Mossy Horror in the deck, the cubes are not easy to death rattle. There is a copy of Defender of Argus, which we can see she can consider off of the tracking, and that could activate 2 of the egg. But also, she's kind of worried about dying.
Yeah, but Argus sort of prevents that as well by giving 2 of these eggs taunt at the same time. It's about as good a pick as possible for her. I think it just slightly wins out on the Ziliax in most ways there. You said yourself, Cora, earlier, the way that Heidi's deck can win a lot of the time is by cubing a Witchwood Grizzly and then duplicating that. Maybe if Heidi held back that cube early on, maybe that would have been the guaranteed win there. But Teebs is just finding all of these cracks in the armor and really going for it.
And now that Teebs has Deathstalker Rexxar equipped and can build beasts every turn, I think command very likely be source. Maybe even the Hunter's Mark to clear up the second, but that would be quite risky considering she has not yet seen a charged Devilsaur or that King Crush. Definitely needs to be wary of that.
There's a lot to think
about. My point being, she can use this removal quite aggressively, quite defensively, and then bank on the Build-A-Beasts to get over the finish line.
Oh, for sure. I mean, with the earlier Rexxar, Teebs should win this game in the long run if she can make it to the long run at this point. A lot to think about this turn. Even casting Dire Frenzy on a Hound can be worth considering because you get the buffed 1-mana Hound in your deck with charge. But there we go. She's going to go with the full board clear.
I think that the reason why Teebs is expending this Hunter's Mark here is because on 9 mana last turn, it would have just made a lot of sense for Heidi to play the King Crush. And I was kind of a little bit confused as to why she didn't just play that King Crush and instead played the tracking to look for something different.
Is insane.
Yeah, this is very powerful. But especially since Katharina had already been tracked over previously, I think I still would have favored the King Crush on the previous turn and just pushing 8 damage to face. But Heidi actually playing patiently and taking a turn off there meant that now Teebs assumed that she didn't have anything big. And Teebs is going to get a little bit punished for that.
Unfortunately, Teebs hasn't had a chance to use this hero power for the last few turns, but she makes the best trade possible there, hoping that that King Crush has to go into the Tundra Rhino. Heidi cannot afford to let the Tundra Rhino survive, obviously, because Teebs can build beasts. Teebs can do some pretty insane things with this permanent charge effect.
Yeah, I myself would have been very tempted to run that Rhino into the King Crush there. But if Teebs were to do that, then how does she ever kill the Devilsaur?
Right.
So
the potential
Teebs,
upside here is actually pretty insane for Teebs.
Exactly. Teebs can afford to take 8 damage, but that Devilsaur could potentially add up to 10 or 15 damage that Teebs can't necessarily deal with. So it's a very greedy play, but it's going to pay off really nicely.
Both cubes have gone, though, already. I think one was tracked away, and then one was played on the egg earlier. So King Crush doesn't represent the threat that it very often does right now, and I guess that's everything that's going through Teebs' mind at the moment.
And I believe we've seen both Playdeads, but perhaps there's still Terror Scale Stalkers left. And Teebs, of course, doesn't know what was tracked over this game.
Right.
So she's still thinking that Katharina is around, Second Cube is around.
That's true, yeah.
A lot of these threats that simply aren't there.
All right, come on, Teebs. It's time to build a beast. Loose.
A lot of good stuff that she could find.
I really like the look of Loose Specimen when there's no other minion on the board at the moment.
Hey, Stubborn Gastropod has taunt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Revasor Runt plus the Hunting Mastiff.
That's very nice.
Teebs just wants pressure on the board.
Yep, Teebs can clear everything up except the egg quite comfortably here while leaving a 4-1.
I do think there was also maybe some merit to the Plated Beetle and the Dire Frenzy this turn, and shuffling additional beetles into the deck to then draw and maybe gain some. But fortunately for Teebs, Heidi's draw is the worst in her deck right now. She's got these Fireflies because after Hunter's Mark was nerfed, this particular version of Hunter that she's playing just got rid of the Candle Shots and the Hunter's Marks and is opting to play Fireflies instead. But the fact that Teebs is able to go toe-to-toe in the late game with Death Rattle Hunter after having been so incredibly behind in those early turns is really impressive.
I'll tell you this, Cora. I know what I'm playing as soon as I'm done casting this tournament because
this Hunter deck is terrifying.
Just how insane this deck is. I said that it's Rexar that will make the difference in the long run. Teebs has barely used that hero power. I think she's only used it twice. It's actually been the strength of Dire Frenzy and these Tundra Rhinos that have made all of the difference for Teebs here.
Well, Heidi can clear the Tundra Rhino, but with the Dire Frenzy in hand, it's unfortunately not going to matter. Teebs is going to have lethal on board. Actually, Teebs just has lethal on board. That Macaw has win.
Yeah, what an insane game.
Man, oh man. Teebs, I think, is very favored in this matchup, but after Heidi was way ahead on board with a cube, a Devilsaur Egg, and a Devilsaur going into turn 6, I thought for sure that she was going to beat the odds on this one, but no, right. Teebs is just going to go to 2-0, and this is last year's standing, so Teebs is going to be playing this Hunter again.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple things. I think there were a couple big decisions that Heidi made in the early game, which could have been done differently. The big one was the one that you mentioned before, which was cubing the egg. As you said, there's no Mossy Horror in the deck, so cracking open the many eggs that the cube spits out, it's very difficult. Maybe if she could have managed to maneuver her way into cubing a Witchwood Grizzly, that would have solidified her lead. But there you go. It's 2-0 to Teebs now.
All right, getting into game number 3. Teebs back on this Hunter yet again, and Heidi now is going to try to reverse sweep with Even Warlock. Even Warlock has a lot of strengths, primarily consistency. The fact that you can life tap starting on turn 1 and draw through so much more of your deck than your opponent means that you should have access to answers. You should have access to more cards simply than your opponent, and then you can out-resource. But the cards that Heidi has in her deck just do not line up very well against a deck that consistently applies pressure.
Right.
And
even the hero
that's what Teebs is trying to do.
The hero power just doesn't line up very well, does it? Heidi's taking damage. Teebs is dealing the damage every single turn.
And this is a really rather unusual version of Even Warlock. I will admit, I had to go and double check the list and see that I wasn't just missing a Mechathune at the top end, because when you see Cheaty, Ankle Biter, and Corpse Taker, it's weird. But this list does just have the Corpse Taker package with Sunwalkers for Taunt and Divine Shield. And I haven't really seen that before. That's quite interesting. The Cheaty Ankle Biter as well, Lifesteal. That's kind of cool.
The Corpse Taker package just tends to appear at some point in the lifespan of, I think, any even deck. We're seeing it nowadays, even Rogue over the last week or so. It's just, I guess, a lot of the Corpse Taker cards happen to be even, and it just works out. And it does look like it could be a good addition.
I don't think that even Warlock is in a very good position right now, and it
Just
hasn't
generally.
been for the last several months. Going back to playoffs, even Warlock was really, really underperforming. But it does tend to be a comfort pick for a lot of players because it is relatively straightforward in how you pilot it.
It's also a consistent comfort pick because of that discounted hero power. As the even Warlock player, you do tend to get to the cards that you need at some point or another.
Yeah, and it's not got horrible matchups against anything. You know, it can certainly get there, even against the most aggressive decks. But it's really going to be tough, especially when Teebs is doing this well to control the board and apply pressure early on. And beautifully executed by Teebs this turn in particular. Heidi at 16 life on turn 4. She would not just be able to play an upgraded Hooked Reaver this turn. She'd have to tap and then play it, and she doesn't have the mana for it. And even if she could, Teebs has the Hunter's Mark waiting in the wings alongside the Master's Call for reload. So Heidi has to life tap to be able to utilize this deck to her advantage. This is what the deck is meant to do. It's meant to deal damage to yourself and then find so many cards that you're able to stabilize. But all the damage that Teebs is dealing is compounded by the fact that Heidi's dealing damage to herself, and it just makes this game that much faster.
I am legit very impressed by those cheaty ankle biters, though. That's a fair amount of healing. Removing those 1 health minions. Now it's on the board. It's got lifesteal, so Heidi can play the Hooked Reaver and then trade the ankle biter in to heal up a little bit. Definitely seeing the merit of the card.
Yeah, I think it certainly fits if you're looking to put in Corpse Taker in particular, anti-potential. But Teebs put Heidi down to 14, maybe to try to bait out that Hooked Reaver, knowing that she has Hunter's Mark in hand.
Yes.
But Heidi's not falling for it. She just goes for the clear there with the Hellfire. And, you know, unfortunately for Heidi, Teebs does roll a bit of a dud there with the Leok. And this very likely means that, barring a top-decked Savannah Highmane on the next turn, Teebs is going to have to play Master's Call, and maybe Heidilisk can get a little bit of breathing room then. Maybe she'll have a turn to be able to develop where Teebs doesn't do much.
Well, there you go. There's the Hunter's Mark target.
Teebs can push 6 to face this turn, even with Hunter's Mark and the Lynx.
Yep.
But now she's looking for primarily Kill Command to be able to go over another taunt, because it's very likely that Heidi have a copy of Corpse Taker or Sunwalker or Second Hooked Reaver. She's running quite a few deck. And Teebs does not have an easy way to get through a taunt now.
No, so she opted to go with the trade instead, just keeping that board as clear as possible, putting Heidi in that position where she has to think about healing, think about dealing with the minions, thinking about putting her own taunt minions on the board. It's very difficult to do all of those at once. So she manages the clear, she manages some healing, but now Teebs with the Tundra Rhino, that has to be dealt with. And as we can see, Heidilisk currently has no way to deal with it.
This is a problem. Teebs does not have natural removal right now, at least for a big taunt minion, but she can, with the Tundra Rhino on the board, turn her beasts into that removal when naturally they wouldn't be able to attack on the turn that they were played. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Heidi has had to play so defensively this game means that she just hasn't been able to play any of these minions that have been in hand for quite a while now. And she's just going to opt to play a 4-drop. Floating 4 mana when she could have played a Sunwalker here, and that's just going to be lethal for Teebs. I don't like that play at all. With the Kill Command having been on, I don't even think the Sunwalker would have gotten the job done there, but I think Heidi was expecting Divine Shield to be there, and it's not, because both Sunwalkers were in hand. So that is going to be game number 3 and the series over to Teebs. A very fast 3-0 victory from that Hunter deck. Dang.
That was, I mean, I think the second game in particular was very exciting all the way through, quite back and forth between Teebs and Heidi. I wasn't sure which of them was going to win until right near the end, but in general, Teebs just going to show how strong a player she really is. I mean, you said it yourself earlier, Teebs isn't just one of the best women in Hearthstone, Teebs is one of the best players in Hearthstone, period.
Yeah. And Teebs does tend to bring, in my experience, very aggressive decks. In a climate where aggressive decks might make the other players a bit uncomfortable. For WSOE, Teebs brought Aggro Mage. I don't think anybody else had Aggro Mage. So it was really this threat that people weren't expecting. And Teebs really does that, I think, to keep opponents on their toes, because aggro decks just scary. And they have a lot of sweet potential in the last hero standing format in particular. So the fact that Teebs was able to bring another very aggressive lineup, get that 3-0 right out of the gate, she's just doing what she does best. And it's really a pleasure to get to watch. Congratulations to Heidi, too. It was a great series, but unfortunately, I think just didn't get quite the read that Teebs had on the meta here, and unfortunately was very behind from the get-go.
Yeah, but I believe Teebs now will be moving forward to the semi-finals. We have plenty more matches coming up today. I believe next up is Cara Cute versus Patra. We'll be bringing you that one right after this short break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back.